All right, so now we're going to jump into our conversation about common mistakes to avoid. And so I separated this section or this part of the presentation into three main categories. So the first category is LSAT mistakes. These often occur before someone applies to law school. The second category is application mistakes. These typically occur when someone is in the process of applying to law school. And then the third category is admissions mistakes. These usually occur after someone has applied to law school and begun receiving admissions decisions. So we're going to go ahead and start with category one, and I'm going to share 7 common LSAT mistakes that applicants make. So LSAT mistake number 1 is taking the exam cold turkey. Sometimes first generation, low income students think that, what they need to do is figure out how they'll do on the LSAT before they devote time to preparing for the LSAT. And so they will take the exam cold turkey just to see what they'll score. One thing I want you all to know is that it's unwise to take the LSAT without first devoting sufficient time and study to prepare for the test. And so taking it cold turkey is definitely not what you want to do. So instead of taking the exam just to see how you'll score, consider using diagnostic exams and practice LSAT tests to gauge where you're at. You can definitely use them to see where you're at starting off and to use them to determine how far you've come as you begin studying and continue studying. These are also great tools to use to determine how far you have to go to get the score that you want to be at. So you can use these to determine how much time you may want to devote to studying for the LSAT. At a minimum, I do like to tell students that you ought to aim for at least a 153 on the LSAT before applying to law school. And again, that is the minimum score you want. So that is the floor. And the reason I say a 153 is because that is approximately the 50th percentile amongst all test takers. And that's the number that you need to be taken seriously by many law schools. And to get into top law schools, the floor is even higher. So namely, if you want to apply to any school within the top 15, top 14 range, you're likely going to need to score at least a 158, if not something in the mid to low 160s to even have a fighting chance. And even scoring, within that range, what you are hoping for is that your soft factors really carry you over to possibly being admitted. LSAT mistake number 2 is not spending enough time studying and preparing for the exam. So this is somewhat related to the first mistake. But what I want you to know is that it is definitely possible to increase your LSAT score anywhere from 15 to 30 points as a result of dedicated studying and preparation for the exam. And so that is something that I have seen applicants do in the past. Oftentimes, however, the applicants that have told me this has happened for them, in order to improve their score this much, they devoted anywhere from 6 months to 1 year studying for the exam. So do know that it's never too early to start studying for the LSAT, especially those of you that want to get into law school next year or start applying next year. But at a minimum, I do recommend that you try to devote at least 6 months to LSAT preparation. So the more time that you devote, the more likely your score will increase significantly. LSAT mistake number 3 is not committing to a consistent study schedule. And so students that treat studying for the LSAT score, like LSAT exam, like a part-time job, tend to yield the most benefits, in my opinion. So what I like to recommend to students is try to devote 20 to 25 hours a week studying. And you can create a study schedule that will look like, maybe Monday through Friday, spending 4 hours of studying each day, Saturday spending 3 hours taking a time practice test, followed by spending 2 hours grading and reviewing all your answers, and Sunday just resting. And so taking the time each and every day, committing to that can really provide major dividends. LSAT mistake number 4 is selling yourself short and assuming that you can't get into a law school unless your score is at or above a school's median. And so while the most competitive applicants often are those whose numbers are at or above a law school's median, as stated earlier in the presentation, every year, students with numbers up to 10 points below a school's median likely get admitted into top law schools. While this isn't going to be everyone's story, the moral is to not sell yourself short. You should definitely know what a school's median numbers are, but you also should know what a school's 25th percentile numbers are. You also can find out in some instances what the lowest score of an admitted student in the previous admission cycle was, and I'll show you how to figure that out later in this presentation. So you can definitely use different tools to kind of figure out what number you really need to aim for in order to have a realistic shot of possibly being admitted into a law school. And I'll talk about this more a bit later. LSAT mistake number 5 is only focusing on the score needed to be admitted to a law school. And so, not to contradict what I just said, but oftentimes students only think about the score that they need to have in order to be admitted to a law school, and not about the score that they need to receive a large scholarship package. And so I think that because scholarship money is typically really important to most applicants, especially low income, first generation and minority students, you should definitely think about what you need to get in order to get a significant scholarship package. Oftentimes, the closer your score is to a school's median, the more money you're likely to have thrown at you. But also, that's not always the case. At least having numbers that are at a school's 25th percentile is definitely going to increase your chances of getting a scholarship money or scholarship offers as well. LSAT mistake number 6 is being afraid of or unwilling to retake the LSAT exam. So while the LSAT is not a fun test to take, and I understand why most students don't want to take it the first time, let alone more than once, it is okay to take the LSAT more than once or twice. While taking it too many times, I'll say 7 or 10, can likely seem excessive, it's not uncommon for applicants to have taken the exam up to 3 or 4 times. So know that if you don't do as well as you would like to the first or second time that you take the LSAT exam, it is okay to keep trying and keep taking it until you get the score that you would like. Definitely, again, if you have a 4-point score difference or more, do remember to write an addendum to explain what you attribute that change in your score to, whether that's simply studying more, having more time to devote to studying, getting a prep course, etc. LSAT mistake number 6 is not utilizing tutors, study buddies, or whatever resources and methods are going to work best for you in order to prepare for the exam. While some students do better with self-studying, many do better with a tutor, a prep course, or accountability buddy. And so nowadays, I think that with the internet, it is often easier than in the past to find affordable tutors, study material recommendations, and possibly people to study with via internet and social media sites. And so before I start talking about common application mistakes, I do want to expound upon what I just stated about recommendations for studying for the LSAT. So I'm going to end this section by providing you all some information about what I hope are some useful resources. Right here on this screen is a picture of some LSAT books that were recommended in an article I ran across in 2019. This article was entitled "The 6 Best LSAT Prep Books According to Tutors and Lawyers." Although this list is a bit outdated in the sense that, you know, it has 2019 editions of books listed, and these books likely have a 2020, if not a 2021 edition out already. I thought it might be useful still to share what the 6 book recommendations were. So book 1 was The LSAT Trainer by Mike Kim. Book 2 was 10 actual official LSAT prep tests. Definitely get the most recent version of this book. And this is a book that contains actual LSAT tests from the past that LSAT creates and sells. Book 3 is PowerScore's Logic Games Bible. Book 4 is PowerScore's Logical Reasoning Bible. Book 5 is Manhattan Prep's Reading Comprehension book. And book 6 is Logic, A Complete Introduction by Dr. Sufan Lee. At the time this article was written, all 6 of these books combined were set to cost right under $250. So I would hope that they're still around that price range now, but that is probably what you can anticipate paying if you decide to self-study and get, you know, enough books to really prepare you for the exam. A few other resources to consider using are the following. Khan Academy, which is a free resource recommended by LSAC. It is my understanding that this may be a good resource after you've already used other sources to prepare for the exam and you simply need practice questions to help you drill. According to an account that I enjoy following, another good LSAT prep course or resource is LSAT Demon. And so Legally Lost underscore is a really great, or I think a really great account on Instagram. But she did a post once upon a time explaining the different LSAT prep courses that she utilized and what she liked or disliked about them. And LSAT Demon is the one that she raved the most about for the reasons you see on the screen. And she stated that this costs about $200 for 6 months worth of a prep course. Two other accounts that I enjoy following on Instagram that also provide LSAT prep services are the Diversity Advocate and LSAT Tutoring. And so the Diversity Advocate provides a 6-week virtual prep course that costs, I think, about $450. And she states that on average, her clients increase their LSAT score by 15 points as a result of completing her course. LSAT Tutoring is another Instagram account, but they provide virtual private tutor sessions starting at $35 an hour in order to prep people for the LSAT. And on her website, she has a testimonial from one client that says they increased their score by 7 points after just one tutoring session. And I'm certain that there are more Instagram accounts out there that also provide LSAT prep. So I definitely recommend using the internet to your benefit. Also, using the internet to your benefit, don't forget about YouTube. I think that there are several good YouTube channels out there that you can probably utilize to learn how to understand the LSAT exam. LSAT Unplugged is one specific YouTube channel that one of my clients that's been accepted into several top law schools said that he used to help him understand the LSAT exam better. So I recommend it for that reason. I do know someone who personally said they used it and has gotten into really good schools this cycle. That same client that I just referenced also stated that paying for LSAT's own prep materials and access to their online practice tests for just $99 was well worth the investment. So that's something he raved about. So if you are interested in this, you can go to lsac.org/LSAT/prep, and you can either buy a $99 program or subscription to their materials, or if you're interested in testing this out in a more non-committal way, they also have a free version. So you can try either of these programs. And again, they're at lsac.org. All right, so category number 2 is common application mistakes. So in this section, I'm going to discuss 11 common application mistakes that minority, first-gen, and low-income students often make. The first application mistake that I see students make is not answering optional questions. And so I know I've said this before, but I truly can't stress enough that it usually is always to your benefit to answer questions about your socioeconomic background, your parents' highest level of education, their job, what programs of interest you have, as well as to provide LSAT score explanations. So I discussed before that, the legal profession is not very diverse. However, for various reasons, law schools are kind of moving away from affirmative action or trying to admit students based on race. And they're really trying to admit diverse classes based on socioeconomic status and class. And so to the extent that you can tell your story and talk about your socioeconomic background, that is really going to benefit you. So work in every opportunity that you can to share that you're first generation, to share that you're a first generation law student, if not a first generation college student, that you come from a low income background, etc. So use those stories or those parts of yourself to your advantage. Application mistake number 2 is underselling yourself on your resume. And so unless explicitly told otherwise, either on the application or via a school's website, it is okay for your resume to be 2 pages. In fact, if you did a lot while in college, your resume probably should be 2 pages. As stated earlier, your resume ought to reflect every single thing that you have done outside of just being a student throughout your college career and beyond. So everything from working at McDonald's to working with Justice Corp should really be on your resume. And any extracurriculars that you did, any articles that you wrote, publications, etc., should definitely be on there as well. Application mistake number 3 is thinking that you have to personalize every personal statement. And so unless the school explicitly asks you to explain in your personal statement why you want to go to that specific school, I like to tell students to try to avoid stating the school's name at all in your personal statement. So I kind of explained earlier why that is, but essentially aim to use a generic personal statement that can be sent out to just about every school that you apply to. And if you really want to explain why a particular school is a good fit for you, consider writing a Why XYZ school essay for the reasons that I explained earlier. Application mistake number 4 is not making the most of optional essays. So while not everyone needs or ought to write optional essays, they really can be good tools to work in more of your story and information about yourself beyond what you can fit in your personal statement. So a lot of times students think that a 2-page personal statement is not enough room to really share their full story. And if that is something that you struggle with, know that you can use these other optional statements to really work in more of your story. Namely, applicants can often stand out by writing diversity statements, which explain any hardships you have overcome, any resilience that you have demonstrated, or even writing a why XYZ school essay to explain why a particular school is of such interest to you can help you stand out in time. So also know that with regard to addenda, providing useful context about any situations, we discussed this during the Q&A, but any situations that school elsewise wouldn't have context for is really helpful as well. So do know that schools read your addenda and do take into consideration, the context that you provide. So law school admissions officers, you can think of them almost like your personal advocates, the ones advocating for why you should or should not go to a law school. And so that context that you provide for them is used as a tool to help advocate for you or argue your case in terms of why you should be admitted. Application mistake number 5 is writing shallow essays. So make sure that any essays that you write are meaningful and substantive. Don't write essays just because you think it will be good to write as many essays as possible, especially when writing a diversity statement. If you don't have anything else to say other than what you put in your personal statement, do not write one. And then even when writing a why XYZ school essay, do not just say things that sound good but don't really have much substance to them. So if you are going to explain why you want to go to a specific school, make sure that you use specific examples and go into depth about why you want to go to that school. So an easy example for me to use is instead of saying something very vague and generic like, your school has wonderful professors and classes, you should really talk about what professors that school has that you want to take classes with and what classes they have that you want to be able to take. So something along the lines of, I really look forward to the possibility of being able to learn under professor and then insert that name and having the opportunity to take and then insert any names of the classes that you want to take. So do not be generic or shallow when you're writing your optional essays. Application mistake number 6 is underestimating the power of good or poor letters of recommendation. So oftentimes schools can tell when a letter of recommendation was written by someone who does not know you well or who did not have enough time to write your letter. And so I truly can't stress enough how much impact a good letter of recommendation can have on your application status. And for students like you all that are out of school and that are applying to law school next year, definitely consider reaching out to old professors or teaching assistants or advisors now and telling them that you're thinking about going to law school and that you would love for them to consider writing a letter of recommendation for you in the future. Because LSAT holds your application materials, including your letters of recommendation on file for up to 5 years, you can even get these people to write the letters of recommendation now and submit it to LSAT, and you will have it by the time that you're ready to apply to law school. It's never too early to begin talking to former or current supervisors, community leaders, teachers, or others to ask them to consider writing a letter of recommendation on your behalf. So don't think that because you're not applying this cycle that you can't already collect letters of recommendation from people. And ultimately, something that you don't want to do is think that collecting letters of recommendation is just a formality. These really are read very, very closely. So to the extent possible, you want people that are excited about you, people that are going to be champions for you, and people that are going to be willing to write a stellar letter on your behalf. So be sure to be thoughtful about who you reach out to and to not just bring your request on anyone. I like to tell applicants to try to give recommenders a minimum of 3 weeks to write something for you, but ideally at least 1 to 2 months will really help them be thoughtful about what exactly it is that they should say in their letter. And it definitely doesn't hurt to have, coffee, or what I like to say, an interview of sorts with your recommenders before actually getting the letter from them. So sit down and talk to them, find out what they think about you, find out what sorts of things they're thinking about putting in your letter, find out what sorts of things they may need from you in order to write a good letter. So sometimes recommenders will ask to see your personal statement or your application materials, your resume, etc. So definitely be willing to share those materials with a recommender if that's something that they say they need to write a good letter on your behalf. Application mistake number 7 is viewing addenda as making excuses. And so I know I've talked about this several times, the value of addenda, but I do just want to stress that addenda really can be one of your best friends in the application process. So definitely don't be afraid to use them to provide context about any of the blemishes that may be contained on your application. Application mistake number 8 is over disclosing. So when working on your application, please resist the urge to try to stand out by providing additional materials that you have not been asked for. So writing samples, copies of certificates, copies of awards, do not submit those if a school has not asked you for them. I know that it sounds like a good idea, but it usually does not land well, and it comes off pretty poorly for applicants, or at least that was always the case when I saw students submit additional materials like that. Also make sure that you're only, sorry about that. Okay, also make sure that you're only disclosing information that you're required to, especially when it comes to character and fitness disclosures. So I stated before that not all schools or jurisdictions require you to disclose the same sorts of information. So just make sure that you read character and fitness questions properly, and that you're only disclosing to each school what exactly it has asked you for. Application mistake number 9 is not applying for or asking for fee waivers. So as those of you who have already applied to law school know, applying to law school can get quite expensive. So if you include LSAT and CAS report fees and apply to 8 to 10 schools, like I like to recommend students do, you're looking at possibly spending at least $1,000 on application-related fees alone. So this does not even include any LSAT prep materials or tutors if you're able to afford them. However, there are definitely ways to mitigate the cost of applying to law school, and fee waivers are really the easiest way to mitigate those costs. So some of the fee waivers that you can apply for, or some of the fee waivers that you can get, include CRS fee waivers. So when you apply for LSAC or when you sign up for your LSAC account, make sure that you opt into the Candidate Referral Service, or CRS, when you create that account, because that is something that schools are able to utilize to find and automatically send you fee waivers. For those of you that have gotten, fee waivers just out of the blue from schools, that is likely because you signed up for CRS. Next, you can often get fee waivers from law schools directly by attending law school fairs, law school events, or even LSAC forums. So for those of you who do not know what an LSAC forum is, this is essentially a giant law school fair where just about every law school in the country comes together, sets up tables, and chats with prospective students. So they are free to attend and usually take place in both Los Angeles and San Francisco every year, as well as at many other major cities throughout the country. But I definitely recommend that if you get a chance to consider attending an LSAC forum if you haven't applied to law school yet. Also, LSAC provides fee waivers based on income. If that's something that you are interested in, you can fill out an LSAC specific application to see if you can be granted an LSAC fee waiver. And so if you are granted an LSAC specific fee waiver, you can get your LSAC costs, some CAS report fees, as well as some of your application fees waived. Application mistake number 10 is not applying early enough in the cycle. And so many law schools admit students on a rolling basis. And so that essentially means that they review applications as they come in. Although most law schools open their applications in September of every year, usually there are only a handful of applicants that actually apply that early. And so because the applicant pool is typically much smaller earlier in the cycle, it is easier to stand out in the admissions process if you apply earlier in the cycle. So I like to tell students that if you're able to, try to get your application in by late October at the latest. Obviously, you can still get admitted to law school if you apply later, but the biggest rush that law schools typically see is usually within the November to December months, because that's when students are on holiday breaks and have time to submit their application. And so at that point, the applicant pool usually becomes much more competitive. And so if you're able to apply by late October, you'll likely be in a really good position to stand out, especially if your numbers aren't super competitive, but your story is very compelling. Also know that there are some schools that have different application deadlines. So many top law schools require you to apply by early February or early to mid-February, whereas there are other schools that have deadlines that, aren't until July of the year that you want to begin law school. So do be aware of different application deadlines, because if you wait until the January of the year that you want to go to law school to start applying, you may be very behind the curve and you may not have time to get your applications into those schools with, earlier deadlines. Application mistake number 11 is not being strategic and not applying to enough schools, or applying to the wrong schools. So I recommend that students apply to 8 to 10 law schools. I also recommend that applicants use a few tools that I'll go over in a second, like 7 Sage's Law School Predictor, as well as LSAT's Law School Profiles, to help you determine what schools is smart for you to apply to. So in the next few slides, I'm going to show you exactly how both of these tools work. On the screen, what you see is what you will see if you go to 7sage.com/predictor. And so 7 Sage's Law School Predictor is a tool that lets you type in your LSAT score, your LSAT calculated GPA, select what month you're applying in, and select whether you're an underrepresented minority, applying early decision, or an international student. So after you make your selections, you simply hit the predict button, and this tool helps you predict your odds of being admitted to different law schools. And so just for the sake of example, I want us to use hypothetical numbers of a potential underrepresented minority applicant. So the hypothetical numbers that we're going to use are a 3.5 GPA, a 164 LSAT score, and we're going to say that this hypothetical applicant applies in October of the admission cycle. Do know that for many top 14 law schools, the median GPA is pretty close to a 4.0, and the median LSAT score is usually close to a 170. But remember what I said about not letting schools medians keep you from applying to law schools? That is important to know, and 7 Sage really probably will help you have confidence about applying to schools that you elsewise wouldn't think that you were a competitive applicant for. So let's see what this student's odds are. Using the predictor on 7 Sage, what you eventually end up seeing after you type in your number is a list of all the schools in the United States, what their 25th percentile numbers are, what their 50th percentile numbers are, 75th percentile numbers, the same with both for the LSAT score and the GPA, as well as your estimated chances of getting in. And so for the hypothetical student that we just put in with a 164 LSAT score and a 3.5 GPA, you can see that despite having both numbers below the median and below the 25th percentile, this hypothetical applicant has a 25% or at least a 25% chance of being admitted into NYU, which is ranked number 6 in the nation. So they also have a decent chance of being admitted into several other top-ranked law schools, all of whom this student has neither the median number for, neither the median LSAT score nor the median GPA for. So I just want to point this tool out because I want you to know that there really is hope for applicants, even when they don't have a school's median numbers. So definitely use this tool, and remember my recommendation of not letting a school's numbers keep you from applying to the school. Also, when I say that you should apply to 8 to 10 law schools, using this tool specifically, the types of schools that I think you should apply to are at least 2 to 3 safety schools, which are schools where there's probably an 80 to 100% chance of you being admitted based on your numbers. Probably about 3 to 5 target schools, so schools where there's a 50 to 80% chance of admittance based on your numbers, and probably at least 2 to 3 reach schools. So those are going to be the schools where there's somewhere between a 25 to 50% chance of admittance based on your numbers. So again, it can be expensive to apply to law school, so really being targeted about where you're applying can really make a real difference for most applicants. Another resource to help you predict your odds of admission is LSAT School Profiles. So at lsac.org, you can click on choosing a law school, then you can click on ABA approved law schools, and a list of all the law schools in the country that are ABA approved will pop up. You can click on a specific law school and then scroll down to the bottom of the school profile to see if they have an applicant profile grid. So these applicant profile grids essentially show real admissions data from a past admission cycle. It's usually the most recent admission cycle. And so this grid on the screen right here is from UCLA's applicant profile. And what you see here is that our hypothetical student with a 3.5 GPA and a 164 LSAT score, if they applied in the last cycle, they would have applied alongside 441 other applicants, so a total of 442 applicants that had numbers within that range, and 32 of them got in. So that is slightly under 10%, but that is, a chance of being admitted, even though the numbers fell below the school's median LSAT score and GPA. So just so that you know, the median LSAT score and GPA for our UCLA last cycle was a 169 and a 3.79. And again, our hypothetical applicant had a 165 and a 3.5. And so, I'm sorry, they had a 164 and a 3.5. So you can definitely see what their odds might have been to get into UCLA law. The applicant grids don't look the same for every school. For some schools, what the applicant grid looks like is this. And so for the University of Alabama, which is my alma mater, their median LSAT score last cycle was a 164 and a 3.94 GPA. And so using our hypothetical applicants numbers of a 164 and a 3.5, you can see that last cycle, they likely would have had a good possibility of being admitted here. So just know that, LSAT with their school profiles, oftentimes schools will provide an applicant grid at the very bottom of the profile, which is really good to use to kind of get a guesstimate of what your odds might be using specific numbers for each school. All right, so moving on to the last category, I'm going to discuss 8 common admissions mistakes. So remember that these are mistakes that applicants make after they have heard back from schools. Admission mistake number 1 is thinking that the waitlist is a soft or polite rejection. So if you are waitlisted to a school, know that that is oftentimes a good place to be. It is definitely not a rejection. And pretty much every year, schools have to pull students from their waitlist in order to fill their first year class. So while some years less students are pulled than others, being on the waitlist does not mean that you do not have a chance of being admitted at all. So if you get waitlisted, plan to do the following things. So send a letter of continued interest, often referred to as a LOCI, about once a month beginning in April and continuing throughout August, or as long as you remain interested in attending the school. Also think about doing a law school tour, reaching out to an admissions officer or anyone else to kind of get a sense of what the school is like, to demonstrate that you do have continued interest in the school, and also to give the admissions committee a sense of who you are as a person. Admissions mistake number 2 is choosing a school based solely on rank. And so law school rank shouldn't be the sole determining factor when it comes to deciding which law school to attend. For example, a school that's ranked number 21 probably isn't too different from a school that's ranked number 25 in terms of job placement, outcomes, etc. And so other factors that you should really weigh when trying to decide which law school to go to include a law school's environment, their culture, student organizations, curricular options, available clinics, hands-on learning opportunities, career outcomes, and potential debt. So those are all things that you definitely want to weigh when choosing what law school to attend. Admission mistake number 3, and again, not to contradict myself, is not knowing that rank does matter somewhat. And so while a law school's rank shouldn't be the sole determining factor when choosing a law school, there is a difference between a law school that's ranked number 12 and one that's ranked number 112 in terms of job placement opportunities immediately out of law school. And so although I'm talking about job placements immediately after law school, do be encouraged and know that there is research that shows that, up to 2 years into your career, your job placement opportunities significantly improve no matter what school you go to. So do know that. But I do want to point out that unfortunately, oftentimes the legal profession can be pretty elitist. And so if you want to go to big law or secure a prestigious federal clerkship right after graduating from law school, a law school in the top 50 is probably best suited to help you do that. There are also, unfortunately, rumors that some top law firms won't even interview students that didn't graduate from a top 14 law school. So essentially, the largest difference between a top-ranked law school and a lower-ranked law school often lies just in how much you may have to hustle right after law school in order to get jobs, or the kinds of jobs that may be immediately available to you upon graduation. Admission mistake number 4 is not building relationships with the admissions team. To the extent possible, I definitely recommend that you try to get to know or talk to admissions officers after, and this is also even good before you're admitted, but after you're admitted to law schools. even if it's just to take a law school tour, say thank you, or to ask them to connect you with current students with interests similar to yours, is likely usually worth connecting with the admissions team. The main reason why I think that you should befriend the admissions team is that because when it comes to things like getting more or any scholarship money, these people have a lot of influence in the process. And to the extent that they know and like you, that can really sway things in your favor. Related to what I just said, admissions mistake number 5 is not knowing how to, or even that you can negotiate your scholarship offer. So more often than not, scholarships are negotiable. But there is a skill and a craft in negotiating them that oftentimes first generation low income and minority students don't know or don't attempt. And so this is something that, other students, your counterparts often are doing. They are negotiating your scholarships. And so this is definitely something that I want you all to have enough confidence and skill set to definitely do when you're admitted to law school. So leverage other scholarship offers to let schools know that you are wanted at other schools and to see if they're willing to increase your scholarship any. And so that is something that really does pay off more often than not, as long as you are polite and kind when you're reaching out to admissions officers. You're probably not doing anything wrong. Admission mistake number 6 is misreading your scholarship offer. So know that all scholarships are not created equal. Whereas most law schools may tell you how much money you will receive each year, some may tell you how much you will receive in total over 3 years. And so, for example, if you receive a letter from a school explaining that your tuition is $60,000 a year and that you have received a scholarship saying that you have been awarded $45,000 a year or $45,000, it's important to know what exactly that means. Is that $45,000 each year? Is that $15,000 a year to total $45,000 over 3 years? Or is that $45,000 your first year and nothing your second and third year? So it's really important to ask for clarity if the conditions of your scholarship are not spelled out in your offer letter. And the reason I stress this is because the last thing that you want to do is misinterpret an offer only to later find out that you're getting less money than you expected. And I have definitely seen this happen before. So that is not a good position to be in. Admission mistake number 7 is not asking for a reduced seat deposit. So oftentimes low income and first generation students can't actually afford the high seat deposits that are required for law schools. So for example, if a school requires you to place a seat deposit of $1,000 or $5,000, for many students, that's a really steep asking price. Whereas for some students, that's like pocket change. But, for low income students, that usually is a lot to ask for. And so do know that you can ask for a reduced seat deposit amount or a payment plan due to your financial circumstance. And so essentially what you want to make sure that you do is just let a school know that you genuinely cannot pay the amount that they ask for, and ask them if they can work for you. The key thing to know though is that you should do this sooner rather than later. You definitely don't want to wait until the day that your deposit is due to have this conversation. You want to have this, as soon or as early in the process as possible. And that, of course, is after you've been admitted and you have your seat deposit date. Admission mistake number 8 is thinking that there is something you can do the summer before law school to prepare for law school. So those of you that have been admitted to law school and you know that you're going in this upcoming school cycle, I definitely recommend spending your upcoming summer to honestly, assuming that COVID, is no longer a thing, but to honestly just relax and have fun. So a lot of times students entering law school stress out about trying to read, the right books or somehow get ready for law school. But the truth is that law school in and of itself will teach you how to do law school. So you're going to learn the right way to do law school after you start. So most, if not all, law schools usually have a 1L orientation that is mandatory. And that is designed to teach you how to brief cases, take exams, handle being cold called, and all the things that come along with the law school culture. So I really do recommend that you spend the summer before starting law school, just taking advantage of your last moments of freedom for a while, because law school is going to be intense. And so you don't want to stress yourself out any sooner than you have to. I do really want to thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to me today. I really do hope that you found the presentation helpful. And as I stated earlier, I really would love for you to follow me on social media. So follow me at Ask Akeisha. You definitely can sign up for my mailing list on my website, and you can get a free personal statement rubric. You can download a free personal statement rubric from there. So definitely check out my website, sign up for my mailing list, check out the materials on there. And if at any point you all have questions that maybe you didn't feel like asking on this presentation, or, you think of, within the next few days, I listed my email address on the screen as well. So you can also email me at askakeisha@gmail.com. And I'm definitely more than happy to answer all your questions via email as well.